Whoops. Well, I've got my notes today, so I try not to forget anything. Thanks for being here. I'm honored people would want to hear about a half-breed Indian from Kansas, what he's been doing, you know. So let's see. Well, I'm going to start off showing a picture of my grandmother here, this is my father's mother back in the reservation north of Topeka in Marietta, Kansas. My brother and I spent a lot of time up there hunting frogs and rabbits, and she would cook them for us. And my parents, my mother was from Oklahoma, Creek Indian, born on the reservation there. My father was born in the reservation in Kansas, and the woman I just showed you was her grandmother that moved him to Kansas. Well, the government moved him to Kansas from 25 million acres between Chicago and Detroit that the Potowatomis owned at that time. The Indians from Oklahoma had been moved on the Trail of Tears, my mother's people, and that's how they ended up in Kansas and Oklahoma. They met at Haskell Institute, a boarding school. A boarding school for, it would basically, well, it's over 130 years old now. And they taught people how to paint houses, be masons. There's no college education program. And my father was the coach there. My mother came from Oklahoma to learn to be a secretary at Haskell, and she met my dad. World War II started, he came back, they married. He became the coach there. He coached football, basketball, track. The high point of his career was when Billy Mills won the Tokyo Olympics in 1964. Billy Mills was my babysitter with my brother and I when we were kids. He got $1 an hour for doing that. Is this mic okay? So the first, when I was born, I went to the home with my parents, and that was at the Indian school, and I lived there for the first 18 years of my life. And it was a unique environment for sure, and but we had our little community there that was pretty tight, and all the families, it was a tribal thing where one tribe takes a village to raise a child type of thing. And so we had a lot of nice friends. I had nice parents. All the Indians there were from broken homes or poverty situations, which pretty much they still qualify in those terms today. So, but it was Haskell Institute, then in the 60s it became Haskell Indian Junior College, and then now it's Haskell Nations University. And it's it's always been the most progressive of the native schools in the whole country, and Indian students from across the country would come there, and my dad recruited them to be athletes if they were talented, and he was a man who helped kind of shape and inspire a lot of the Indian students as a father figure and a real positive person in many lives. And when he passed away, in the 60s, they named a sports complex after him, and I'm going to show in a minute the sculpture I was able to do in front of my father's building there in Lawrence. And so, it's like my next birthday, I'll be 70 years old, and so it's and I've been in Santa Fe almost 40 years, in Abiquiu the last 25. And it's like I was thinking, 70 years, what does that mean in terms of art in this country and art in Santa Fe? Well, 40 years ago, there was not many galleries. Contemporary art was just starting to take off. The native world with IIA that Lloyd Keevan was probably the main founding factor in that. And so, but if you're an 18-year-old artist today, you come to Santa Fe, there's 200 galleries, recognition from around the world. People come here knowing that the young talent in the native world is here. you know, 40 years ago, it was just, there was nothing. And 40 years ago, there was not one outdoor sculpture in the city of Santa Fe other than Tommy Hicks from Shedoni had one at the old Sweeney Convention Center. And there was a little burrow with firewood on the back. Those were the only two sculptures in the city of Santa Fe. And so it was ripe to happen, you know, and I got here right at the right time. I worked at Shedoni, my first job, and I started the sculpture department at the College of Santa Fe, and when they didn't even own a hammer or a nail in those days. And so, but it was exciting times. I mean, there's the students, the people were here in those days. You know, Alan Hauser was here. I worked on his waxes there, Fritz Scholder, R.C. Gorman, Earl Biss, Doug Hyde, Kevin Red Star. All these guys were energizing Santa Fe and, you know, getting a lot of spotlight that had never ever been here before. And again, 40 years ago, even across America, there weren't that many galleries like there are now. You can drive to back to Lawrence, Kansas, and you're going to, in these little towns of 500 people, there have a little gallery or something. And in those days, in the 60s, it just started with kind of the hippie head shops, and they would do handmade candles and little things, and then they started putting art on the wall. And that was my first opportunity with some jewelry. The Hodgepodge head shop in Lawrence, Kansas would sell for me. They would promote my work. And that was 1968 when I started there. I got out of high school in 64 with a double major. Well, then I went to the University of Kansas when I was 17, and I thought, I'm going to be an artist. I didn't know what that meant. I'd never been to a gallery or a museum in my life, but I knew I could make things. And up at the reservation, my great-grandmother had made all these beaded clothes, and a couple times you go to powwows, things like that, and see artistic beauty. And for some reason it stuck, and you know, I didn't know what it meant, but to be an artist. But University of Kansas had a great art department there, and there were like 1,000 BFA majors. You could sculpture, jewelry, interior design, whatever. But that's a lot, and they had it was one of the best. It was the first university in the United States where you could get a degree in jewelry, and so Professor Carlisle Smith helped me out a lot, and then my professor Eldon Taft. We ended up getting a Ford Foundation grant to go to Costa Rica and build a bronze casting foundry down there in 1971. And that was 3 months down there. That was a cultural change for me in a positive way. Getting out of the country, seeing people's interest in art, how important it was to them in those countries down there, and being able to do this facility in Central America for their first one for university use in Central America. And so University of Kansas, it turned out it was a very nurturing environment for me, and I was still living at the Indian school there with my parents. My father passed away in 1966, and my mother got a job there working for the secretary to the superintendent at the school, so we were able to stay at our house there and with our friends, so that was nice. Let's see. One of the things that was interesting is Dan Dominguez is a good friend of mine, and I saw his book, and it shows him with this old pickup truck that his grandparents used to drive him around in. Well, my grandparents had a '49 Chevy pickup, and they'd come down for dinner on Sunday to Haskell in Lawrence, and then my brother and I would get in the back of the pickup. We'd ride back up to the reservation in the back of the pickup with my grandparents, and didn't think anything about it. You can't do that these days. It's illegal to drive, you know, unless you're on a reservation, to ride in the back of a pickup. And there's no indoor plumbing. It had an outhouse, you know. There's electricity, but no running water or anything like that. And finally, when I was out of high school, they got indoor plumbing and got modernized a little bit. But when I was a little kid, you cooked with a wood stove and you know, the outhouse. So, but we didn't think of, yeah, that's, if you're a kid, whatever your world is, that's what it is, and you don't think it's strange. Looking back, it wasn't what everybody was experiencing. So, let's see. And along the way, I've had, you know, being in Santa Fe was that, you know, if I'd been anyplace else, I don't know if I'd be here having amounted to anything at all. I could have been living under a bridge in Topeka, Kansas, you know. And but by being here and working at Shadone and getting exposure and opportunity, and I was, by then I'd gone to Cranbrook, and then before I moved to New Mexico, and so 7 years of art schools, you know, I kind of had a clue of what was going on, and I figured, but you've been educated, what is your statement going to be as an artist? And I thought if I could do one thing, it'd be monumental totemic art inspired by the Northwest totems. And so that's the one thing I wanted to do. And then as starting to do more shows and having time to have a studio where I could paint, I started doing a lot of large paintings, and I've been in the Art and Embassies program for about 12, 15 years, and I've had paintings in Abu Dhabi, Geneva, Africa, Uzbekistan, places, embassies around the world. And had a show at the Kennedy Center and Grand Palais in Paris in 1982. The piece at the White House in 1997 was one of 12 sculptures that were from the native world, curated by the curator for the Heard Museum in Arizona, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the 12. And so I had a 28-foot sculpture in the Rose Garden, and Hillary Clinton mentions it in the book, 20th Century Sculpture in the Rose Garden. So some people like Hillary, some people don't, you know, but I do. And so anyway, that's been kind of a high point, and my mother was able to go there with me before she passed away at 94 up in Durango. And so she got to share a lot of my nice moments as well as my son's. And my son, Brian, is sick today, or he'd be here, but he's got a show that's at a gallery on Canyon Road, Winter Round, that he's got one painting there that's got 5,000 hours into it. And when you look at this painting, you say, yes, I believe it. It's 14 feet long, and it's applied with little bits of oil paint in amounts like that, 14 feet across. And he went back and forth 3 or 4 times, applying the texture, then the paint. And it's pretty cool. And I've got 2 brothers who are artists, and all 3 of my sons could be, but Brian's the only one who's making it his career. So anyway, I guess we'll start showing the slides, and that'll be you can see how the pathway somehow had a thread through it that makes sense, I think. Okay, this is an early piece of jewelry. Made this about probably 45 years ago. And that's a wedding engagement ring where they lock together with the diamond kind of fitting over the jade center stone. And this is one of the last pieces I have in slide form that's at the entryway to the city of Lawrence, Kansas. Is one of the 1% for Arts awards that, well, it's the only one I ever won, but it was back in Lawrence. And the friend of mine, Stephanie Zori, is in the crowd here today. She's been a long-time friend and attorney of my family. And so, but you can see the scale of that, and it's the West Turnpike entrance to Lawrence, Kansas. And that was pretty cool, because in high school at Lawrence, I got kicked out of my art class for a few days, you know, for doing something, I guess. Another piece of jewelry. But this is a little reliquary I made, and there's you can see all the different materials there. It's about 14 inches top to bottom, and there's it's a reliquary, and I had this little rubber pig's head that I cast in silver and put it behind that lens, so when you look into it, you see this little silver pig head looking back at you. But that piece took quite a bit of work there. And this is a hollowware form. You take a sheet of bronze, and by hammering it, you raise it up. And so this is a 2-part piece, and it's about 16 inches tall. This is the first piece of sculpture I ever made in New Mexico. When I moved here, I arrived at Shidoni knowing I had a job there, and I brought this little scale wooden model, and I said, I'd like to show this at your summer show with Alan Hauser and different people. And they said, yeah, sure. And so, as you know, which was kind of supportive in a way that not a lot of places in the country would, as like artists are kind of, in those days, you know, not part of the mainstream like they are here these days. But, and Maytag bought that piece, and which was nice to have her buy it, and then she donated it to a foundation. And then this is the second piece I ever made in New Mexico, and that's, you see Shidoni in the background there, and that piece is 28 feet tall. It's kind of a moon, butterfly moon totem. You can kind of see the wing forms at the top. And they were, I made them out of wood in those days because that's all I could afford for sure. Here's some models similar to the ones I brought to Shidoni. These were intended, since I started the sculpture department at College Santa Fe, in those days they had a traffic circle, and I was hoping to do 4 24-foot circles, the cardinal directional points of this traffic circle, and everybody liked it other than Brother Luke in those days, and he says, no, we don't want it. So they never got built. And this is a kind of a bad shot, but it's got Taos background, Taos Mountain in the background there. It's a piece I did for R.C. Gorman up there, who was a very generous person in many ways. Then this piece is next to the museum when Institute of American Indian Arts were on Cerrillos Road, and this was right next to the museum there on Cerrillos. That piece was 18 feet tall. And one of my first steel pieces with a horse skull on it. This is a piece that's at one side of Hotel Santa Fe. And you can see a lot of the elements that I was using. I said, you know, it's obvious, you know, the totem influence. And then the other elements that I combined were kind of I like the bone breastplates that the warriors used, the Plains Indians, and I like the shields, the spirit shields, protection shields. And so I kind of just changed the scale and combined them in different ways. This piece is in Aspen. You can see me at the bottom there a little bit. There's this piece was for Martina Navratilova up at her ranch there in Aspen. This is a piece that's in front of my father's building at the Indian School in Lawrence. It's 24 feet tall. He was 6 feet tall, so there's like 4 of him adding up to this and kind of representing numerically the 4 directions also. And this is that piece in Lawrence also again. This is a piece that's the Herd Museum. That's me up there trying not to break my neck. This is a piece in process, and this one may be out of order, but you can see the scale, and the big steel pieces are always fabricated horizontally, and you never know what they look like if you made the right decisions until you get a crane and stand them up. This piece is 18 feet tall, Moonbird, and it's at Las Palomas Hotel in Santa Fe on San Francisco Street, down from next to Benessy's. And that's a 1-inch thick steel. This piece used to be at the in the lobby at the Inn of the Anasazi, and they hired an interior designer, paid her a bunch of money to come in and redecorate the Inn of the Anasazi, and so they decided to get rid of this, and they were going to sell it, but they didn't own it, so I just took it back and ended up selling it to, privately to some people, but it should have stayed there. And here's a painting on paper. And then these are some early kind of fetish totems. That piece is 6 feet tall with the wood, and there's a mountain lion skull on the top. And there's a little glass relic hole in the center, and I had some, I think, mountain lion teeth inside of that. And I guess I grew up in the Catholic Church. I was an altar boy. And so to have a consecrated altar, you have to have a relic of a saint, a bone, a piece of hair, or something like that. And so I started, I don't know, somehow a strange influence with that thinking. And here's a show I did at the Institute of American Arts Museum downtown. That's an Alan Hauser piece in the forefront there, but I've got the totem pieces in the background. And here's another in-process piece. About 25 years ago, I did a one-man show at the Wheelwright Museum called Many Moons, and I did 12 of these fetish totems that are 8 feet tall, and the moon disc is 4 feet, so they're 12 feet tall, and 12 of them at the Wheelwright Museum, if you're familiar with it, I was able to put these in pretty much of a circle, and they lit it from the center out, so it's kind of like dusk with the full moon rising. And these are some pieces at the old Copeland Rutherford Gallery on Canyon Road, and that's my turquoise Land Cruiser in the background there. And this is a piece that I did in Michigan. It's not too good of a shot, but it's on the ground. It's 45 feet long. It's the first big steel piece that I did. And a gentleman from Michigan had seen the Shidoni show where I had the piece that Ann Maytag bought, and he said, I'd like one for my yard. And so he flew me back there, and he had bought the estate from the former president of General Motors, so it was a huge place and fabulous, and they had a great art collection. And this was his first big outdoor piece that he wanted to have on his property there. He ended up being an ambassador to Holland or someplace, and he passed away at a young age, unfortunately. He was a real promoter of contemporary art. This is a little model of a piece that, and you can see the big, the full-size one in the background, kind of. And this was at the Turtle Museum back in Niagara, New York, Buffalo, New York. And if you're on the Canadian side, you'd look across and see the Turtle Museum, and it was shaped like a giant turtle. And the head in the head was a restaurant on the second floor, but somehow they lost their funding, and the place doesn't exist anymore as a museum. And this is a close-up of the one that was on Cerrillos by the II Museum. And this piece is, I think, 9 feet tall, steel. This piece, you can see the flames in the background. It was they did this movie series called Into the West, and the opening scene, they showed this thing igniting on fire in a real dramatic way to do the intro for that part of the series. Okay, here, this is we're taking this piece to, this is Galisteo, and we're taking it to this collector's house about a mile away from here to his ranch. You can see the crane lifting it up. And this was called Eagle Mesa Dancer. And here's some more of the moon from the Mini Moon show. And like I said, there were 12 of them. I still got a couple left, and they're for sale. And so I rented a sandblaster and took it to my studio and sandblasted all the glass disc. And this is kind of a fetish totem piece, and the II Museum bought that for their collection. It's kind of like a wrapped mummy bird with a coyote skull on the top. This is a piece I did in Hawaii. There was a group of us, Dan Domingo, Harold Littlebird, Denise Wallace. We went to Washington, New York, Canada, Hawaii, Arizona talking to the native peoples to figure out a statement for the opening National Museum of the American Indian in New York, their Battery Park facility, while they were starting to build the one in Washington, D.C. So I did this little moon totem piece. And if the slide was good, you could see that you'd be able to see the ocean in the background from this location. And since there were some dancers and singers as part of our group, they invented this little ceremony for the totem piece here. And that's a better shot of the piece that used to be at the end of the Anasazi. It's called Sun Shield. And all those pieces there float off the orange background. And then these are some little fetish pieces from a show 25 years ago. These are all slides, meaning all the work you will see today is at least 25 years old, because now everybody does the digital things, and I've got to get equipped so I can show the new work that I've done. But I think the old things will still look pretty interesting. And this is a rawhide shield. It's 48 inches, and with the horsehair coming down, and had a real, you can see their shield-like quality to them. And that piece was 9 feet tall, the rawhide pieces. And this piece was about 7 feet tall, I think. It's got lead bezel around the glass lens. And these pieces are all 6, 7, 8 feet tall. That piece is about, I think, 18 inches tall. And you can see it's got a little lead square bezel at the top holding a glass lens inside. And this piece is about 6 feet tall. It's in my garage right now. And so I did I did a project in Africa, and I studied a lot of the shields over there. And when I came back, I did this show for Elaine Horowitz with my interpretation of shields with fetish animal parts. And a couple of these pieces ended up in the collection of the National Museum of the American Indian in D.C. And that piece is probably about 5 feet from top to bottom. This is kind of a strange one with I used these jaw bones from a horse, kind of like wing things by the head there. And you can see I used a lot of skulls on these pieces as the focal point. And I don't know, growing up hunting and fishing and respecting the animals that I would, you know, shoot and eat. And I had a real relationship to all their parts, because I would, you know, shoot them, skin them. My grandmother and mother would cook them, or I'd cook them sometimes. And so I always felt, you know, this is a way of respecting them in a certain way. It's like their presence is still around in my little world, and reminding me of their lives. Yeah, and these pieces, I think that these are all probably at least 30 years old. And these are steel, 1 inch thick by 8 feet tall, and they weigh about 800 pounds apiece. And I had these skulls bound and floating in the space in the center of those. I had they were bear skulls and I think wild pig skulls. And sometimes I don't know why I do these things, but they just kind of pop out, I guess. They're pretty interesting pieces. It takes the right person to want to live with one, I guess. And that's a wall piece. Putting that was up on Camino de Manisol, and trying to install that with an adobe wall, we had to drill through 18 inches of adobe, put a steel plate on the back, and then bolt it on the inside, and then cover it up with the plaster so you couldn't see the bolts. And this piece is in Africa, which was a great experience outside of Nairobi. I had you can see the parts going together. I went over there, and I took 2 cameras in those days. This is before digital things, and I had one with slides and one with just film. And the African guys there, since labor is so cheap over there, $2 or something a day, and materials are so expensive. In the U.S., it's just the opposite. Materials are pretty cheap, and labor's expensive. And so I had these guys working in 3 separate locations, because the gentleman I did it for was, he owned a couple glass factories, one in Nairobi, one in Mombasa. And so we had facilities there with space and workers. And this guy had about 10 houses around the world, in London, Paris, different places, Santa Fe, New York. And these black workers, who were great guys, I worked with them and became good friends with about 2 or 3 of them. And I thought, these guys remind me of a certain buddy I've got back home, and this and that. And it'd be nice to have been able to help them and bring them, back to America and help support them or something. But it would have been impossible. But I'd be taking these photographs, and all these black guys would go out of the way not to be in the frame. And so, and then I thought, what's he doing this with all this precious metal, or, aluminum, steel, paint? And like I said, they were working in 3 different locations. And so after I was there for 3 months, and the last 2 weeks, this pieces all started arriving at the central location, putting together. And instead of trying to be out of the frame when I photographed the work being done, they were trying to get into the frame so they would be part of it. And they started realizing I hadn't touched any of it. Everything about this being made, they had done it all themselves. I just was the instructor. And then we finally got together, and we were taking it with a huge crane to be installed. And a couple of the guys said, Buona, Doug, we don't know what it is, but we like it. And that's the best art compliment I've ever had. There's another shot. And there were walls built up at the base of it. You can't see it in any of these things, but and the earth was built up to it. It was about 90 feet long, and you have to fly over an airplane to see the earthwork involved with that center focal point totem piece. And okay, I guess that's it. And so, like I said, everything that you've seen today is at least 25 years old. I've got some pieces now that I'm trying to do. I've got a piece down at the Botanical Garden, and one at the front door to the state capitol, a piece at the convention center, and a lot of pieces from Boston to Seattle, across the country, and there's some adventure stories to tell on getting those things delivered. But right now, my latest project is out in the lobby here. I've got a proposal for 8 30-foot steel sculptures. Hopefully, they're going to be done at in Santa Fe City or Santa Fe County somewhere. And I've got 2 people helping me, Paul Rainbird and Jack Stam, who were trying to get people interested, the right person, the right group, and pick out a location and have these things realized in Santa Fe. But 8 30-foot pieces would be, I think, kind of a destination art project. And we've done a lot of planning and have a lot of support. All the museum directors here, Folk Art, Randy Randall from Tourism, the director of the Botanical Garden, are all giving thumbs up. So now we just have to keep pushing forward and find somebody who's interested in and wants help support it and find a way to do that. But if you have any questions, ask. Thanks for being here. And Della Warrior, okay, Della snuck in on me here. I'm focusing on her. She is the director of the museum here, and with her support, a lot is happening for me, and she has maybe some potential out-of-state interest in doing the proposals that's out in the lobby. But if one set got done, I would make the following set, because I would like to do these around the world, maybe 12 locations around the world with 8 30 to 60-foot totems. Some places it would be appropriate for 2, maybe, but 2, 4, 6, but 8 is kind of the parts it takes to really get the impact that I want the piece to have, and to people feel the energy if they're standing close to these pieces with the 8 number. And so Della's on board trying to lead the way to get it realized, the first one someplace. So I thank Della for that. Okay, well, thank you so much for taking a Sunday to listen.